All right, we got Brandon Ingram on the podcast tonight. We're going to talk about architecture.
Second time
he's been on the podcast.
Round two.
I was embarrassed because I said I wasn't on the first one, and he corrected me.
Yeah, if you guys don't
that.
follow him, there's very few. I mean, there's a handful, but younger men and women who are doing traditional design, traditional architecture, who really know what they're doing, and he's right there at the top with anyone. So definitely check out his work, draw some inspiration from it. He's definitely somebody to keep your eyes on.
100%. I probably text him once a week saying, "Can I get just a screenshot of those drawings?"
I'll Venmo you. All right, guys. If you have a print calling for James Hardy Artisan Siding and you just found out that they've discontinued that line, what to do? Do what others are doing and move the specification over to Duration. Longer lengths, no required edge sealing, no clearance restrictions, easy and safe to work with, complementary moldings, and the authentic look of wood siding. And if you need a special reveal or profile, that's not a problem either. To learn more about Duration Polyash products, please visit their website at durationmillwork.com and be sure to check them out on Instagram. How are you?
I'm well. How are you guys?
Doing good. I think I missed your first podcast, right?
Did you?
I think you were there.
I think so.
Yeah, I don't think you did.
I mean, that was like 12 years ago, it seems like.
12. I definitely missed it if it was 12 years ago.
You said that earlier today, and I
think you were there.
Did I not?
I know there were at least 3 of you guys there. At the time, I thought there were 12 of you, but I think you were there.
Maybe it was someone else. Was it Matt from Island Architects?
I mean, surely you wouldn't have missed mine. Come
Potentially.
On. Surely you wouldn't have missed
Yeah.
I didn't. It certainly wasn't intentional. All right,
I thought it would have been more memorable than that.
Totally agreed.
Totally
agreed.
I shouldn't have even said anything because now I'm just setting myself
really
up.
Offended me. Don't offend the guest.
Yeah, you were.
Well, Brandon, it's really nice to see you again.
You were definitely there.
I definitely was. I'm gonna have to check it, but I definitely was.
Yeah. Well, I was telling John. I was texting with John or DMing with John that. I mean, it literally was probably, was it 4 years ago? I think it was probably 4 years ago. And just the amazing things that have happened between then and now. I mean, not just professionally, but just with the way things are now, how crazy things are now versus how crazy things were then. It's like a different world. It's like we're just in a different world.
Well, ignoring the obvious of COVID and the world, what has changed the most drastically for you?
Yeah, I mean, ignoring COVID, it just the busyness, the rat race of the workload that we all have now. It's crazy. It's just crazy. I mean, obviously, I've had to grow in the past 4 years. I mean, I've had to hire more people and get bigger offices and change with the times. But yeah, it's just crazy. And not only the challenges of keeping up with a lot of work, but keeping up with things like lumber prices and supply chains and that sort of thing that are factors that we just weren't really that worried about 4 years ago.
How many people do you have working for you now?
I've got five that work with me. That's administrative people, designers, draftsmen, that sort of thing. Covers the whole gamut. But I probably, in reality, I could probably hire 3 more. I just, I'm just one of those people who's always been sort of hesitant to grow too quickly. So I'm always a little bit more controlled in bringing on new people and growing my office quicker than it needs to. Although, like I said, at this point, I could probably easily handle 3, but who knows how long, this wave's going to last.
Yeah, we were having that conversation last week that at some there's got to be a breaking point.
Gotta be, right?
Where I mean, even people who are building high-end homes at some point are just going to be like, you know what, this just doesn't make sense to build right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the market in Atlanta is always a little different than I think the nationwide market. And I do projects all over the country, of course, but a lot of my work is here in Atlanta. And there's literally nobody that's saying no, nobody that's saying slow down. They're just taking it for what it is and saying, okay, this is our new reality. So, darn, that really stinks that we have to pay 60% more for lumber than we did a year ago, but let's go anyway. And you know, in full transparency, we work with wealthy people who have deep pocketbooks that or deep pockets that don't get affected the same way, you know, the vast majority of people do. And so they have the luxury of being able to say, oh darn, that stinks, let's go. But it's crazy. I keep waiting on the calls from clients to start rolling in where they're saying, you know, this is just unbearable, we're going to wait it out for a year. But it's just not happening yet. I'm not going to wood.
Do you think it has to do with the fact that, you know, the world, I'm using air quotes, was shut down for so long that when things started opening back up, it wasn't going back to normal? Yeah. So now we're almost trained to realize that what is in front of us is reality, right, and there is no returning back to something else. And we need to, and you either, you know, because I think John said it last week, is that, you know, how can I tell a client to wait only for, you know, lumber to continue to go up, and then I'm the asshole that told them to wait, and now they're paying, you know, another double on top.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And I think on top of that, Nick, it's really also, I think, taught people that you just never know what's going to happen. Like, what are you going to do? Wait around a year and here comes another pandemic? You just have to go. You have to strike while the iron's hot, and you've got to do what you want to do because life is short, and money's just money. Easy for some people to say, but it's, you know, it was, I think it was an eye-opening thing. And to your point, you have to live in the now. You have to live in the reality that is reality. And, you know, I have people, it's funny, I've got a lot of clients now. I have a lot of young family clients and families with, you know, kids that are 7, 8, 9. And these people are really feeling the pressure to get something done, whether they're renovating or building a new house, but to get it done while their kids are in their house, while their kids are living with them. And I feel like that's becoming a common theme around my office is we got to go before these little kids start moving out and going to college. And we kind of laughed at a client whose 12-year-old son started getting hair under his arms, and she's panicked. She's like, oh my gosh, he's getting hair under his arms. We got to move. We got to go quickly. Like, how fast can we get this done? And I mean, it was kind of interesting, but it's true, and people are realizing that. You know, I mean, even for me personally, thinking back on the past year of homeschooling our kids and how painful that has been, but those moments are fleeting, and the time with kids in our houses are they don't really last that long, and I think people are maybe sensing that, and they want to get the most out of these houses they're spending millions of dollars on, and do it while they can, and enjoy them while they can.
I feel like money is only money may be a point of contention with some people, but it is true. If you sit around and wait and things go up a year from now, or it's more expensive, or there's less resources available to everyone, we're gonna be in a tougher position than we are now. And if you're dealing with customers where the financial impact of that isn't quite as critical, then yeah, you have to go, you have to man up, you have to, like you said, strike while the iron's hot. Even looking at it from, you know, you look at big numbers and it's say $10 million and you're getting 25% less on your build. At some point, it doesn't matter how much money you have, you're just going to be like, it doesn't really make that, like, you know, if 10 million's our budget and we could build this now, and a year from now we can build less, or a year past we could build that much more, it's but it is uncertain. You don't know if it's going to go up, it's going to drop out, or what's going to happen. But people are still spending money and still calling, and the phone's still ringing. It's I don't know. I think if I were in the position, I'd just be like, I'm just going to sit tight and at least see what happens, just because everything's changed. And like you said, it's fleeting. Family life's fleet, but like life right now is just insane. And I'm not one to be making massive decisions in life in general, but right now I'm just like, I'm going to sit back and just kind of see what falls into place.
Well, it's a total gamble. I mean, it's literally a gamble. You could do that, and that could be the exact thing you needed to do, because in a year things could be back to, you know, air quotes, normal. or you wait a year and things are twice as bad, and then you're even farther behind. So it's a complete gamble. And like I said, when I said money's money, I didn't mean that in a condescending way, but for people that have money to gamble with, it literally is a gamble.
But I that saying, like, and I feel like, maybe a little bit of backpedaling in a sense, but it is. I mean, $1 is $1 and $10 million is $10 million.
Right.
It just because you can spend $10 million doesn't mean that you have, I would contest saying that doesn't mean you have money to gamble. If you have $1, that you're gambling with that too.
Right.
It's scale.
Sure.
And, I think at the end, it's something that if you really sit down and think about it, and I don't know why recently I've been having this conversation, is like when you really sit down and think about, that is a terrible, terrible ringtone.
I know. I forgot to mute my office phone.
That's okay.
It was like aliens landing.
It's almost, it's just so interesting to think that, everything we do revolves around money.
Yeah.
Everything. Yeah. And, and it's, obviously with the state of the country is in and everything that's going on in the world and politics and with COVID, and it's just, there's so much that everything roots back to money, and it becomes this thing that we have created this, like evil persona around.
Sure.
And especially when we're talking, at the higher end of the market.
Right.
But the money is money. I think that no matter what, large or small, that it's a gamble no matter what. And I think I guess where I'm going with this is to Tyler's point. Tyler, like you just said, that if our budget was $10 million and we were going to build a 10,000 square foot house, and then this year it's like, all right, well, my budget's still $10 million, but now I only get to build an 8,000 square foot house. You're still building a house. You're still you're still custom building something, and it's like, did you really need the 10,000 square feet, or can you be more? I think this is where the architecture side can really benefit from it, where it's now you have to push creativity.
That's right.
Because my budget didn't go up. I don't have more dollars in my bank account, and I still need to build this house. So, lumber prices went up. So how do we react to that?
Right.
And we react to it by being more creative with what that dollar does. You see everyone talk, or at least for me, it's like everyone's talking about advanced framing. How do I cut my lumber usage down by 20%? Can I switch to advanced framing?
Yeah, but then you got to use 5/8 drywall. Everyone forgets to tell you that.
John Hourihan, everybody.
What's up? Just jumping in with the negativity.
Here we go. No.
Look at that
But I've got
backdrop.
sun blasting into my eyes. I'm trying to get the sunlight out of there, but
Brandon, you look
I
beautiful.
know, preening myself a little bit here.
Well, I mean, to John, your point. I mean, yeah, but that's not just the only answer.
No,
my
move
point
is to phase things. Like, don't finish a basement, or
Correct.
don't finish the garage. I mean, we're doing some builds where it's evolved. The pricing structure's evolved, and forget about this is just common, and regardless of the environment we're in with prices, it's just some clients just have amazing taste when it comes to actually picking selections. Meaning when you set out on designing a home and they're like, oh yeah, we're going to do this, it's going to be plain, and then you get into it and they start to see it, then they want to almost go, yeah, I'm not going to skimp anywhere.
Right.
Like we have a client now, we did a rendering and it's like we were going to do asphalt, and 70 square of roofing was going to be asphalt and only 30 square were going to be cedar, and they're like, we just love the cedar. Can we do the whole thing? Like regardless of how much that costs, like if cedar was up or down, that has to be compensated somewhere, or you dilute somewhere. So for us, it was like, we'll plan out the whole basement. That's like 3,000 square feet or more, but we don't need to finish it now. We'll put a sub panel down there so you can run it. So it's just planning out at the budget, and it's just trying to figure out where it's best spent without compromising design.
Well, so I think that one good thing to come out of that, which has always been sort of a design philosophy of mine, is that smaller, so many times more often than not, it really is better. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love designing 20,000 square foot houses. They're fun and they're easy. Big houses are easy to design, but who really needs a house that big? I mean, literally, who needs a house that's even 10,000 square feet? And I think that the best houses, the sweetest houses, the ones that feel the most right, are the ones that, to your point, Nick, are maybe smaller, and they require more creative solutions and more interesting design opportunities present themselves. I think that, like I said, the easiest houses I design are the big ones. The hardest ones are the ones when somebody's like, hey, I've got, a limit. I can only build 1,500 square feet and I need to spend, $500,000. That's an incredibly difficult house to design. It's incredibly difficult because one thing that, if people like me do their job well, you're not going to make the house look bad. Like, you're going to deliver an attractive house and a good house and a quality house. And so coming up with design solutions that can get a client to the right budget and the right size. The right size not meaning a required size, but the right size meaning a house that feels like a house, not an office building.
Do you feel as though most customers come to you wanting more house than they need?
Strangely enough, no, Tyler. I think that I'm starting to get people that are opening up to that, and they're at a phase of life. Like I said, I've got a lot of young families who the knee-jerk reaction is, gosh, my kids they need playrooms, they need like places for homework. But really, and that's another thing about maybe this whole 2020 situation, is that people realize how families can survive really close together. Like, you don't necessarily need your kids to be over the garage 80 feet away from the master bedroom. It's kind of nice to have everybody close. I think people appreciate that now, and I think people are opening up to the fact that that houses don't have to be sprawling oil slicks of a floor plan that just keep going and going and going, and they're cozier spaces. Smaller houses are hopefully going to stay in vogue for a while. I hope. The biggest house I have right now, the very biggest one I'm working on right now, new house, it's about 8,000 square feet, and that's a very healthy house size. I mean, you think about it. How many square feet does one person need in a family? You have a family of 5. Which I have a family of 5, and I live in a house that's about 4,200 square feet, and it's more house than we need. It truly is. So if you start factoring that, to have an 8,000 square foot house and justify it, you almost need to have 10 people in your family. And that's not a common thing.
It is insane. And before this past year, it's not, when you have a family, it's not as though you spend that much time at home.
Correct.
When you have kids and they start growing up and you're running around and both parents are working and you're going to events after school and running them around before school, you're paying for a lot of house and you're maintaining a lot of house, and it really isn't necessary. I mean, it's definitely not necessary. Right. I've never really gotten the appeal of that, even if you have the money and you have the means. To me, it's why not make something that's, doesn't look so huge, doesn't seem like so pompous. It's almost like make something that's scaled correctly, that doesn't look huge, that for a family still works well, but then you're not basically working to fund this house that nobody's spending that much time in. And yeah, this past year has been different, but I think everyone's gotten used to just bigger. Right. And I mean, even cars and everything else. And it's like, do you really need like 10 seats in the car so that you can just pack more stuff with you and bring it? Like, why not scale down a little bit and be like, hey, you know what? You don't need 17 outfits to go spend the weekend at your grandparents.
That's right.
But I guess also that, like, I'm in an old house. It's not super energy efficient, and I look at what it costs to maintain our home. And like, for me, it's like, I wouldn't want anything bigger than what we have. We're a small family, or a family of 4, but I just think of the cost of maintaining something like that. And it blows my mind that that's what people want.
Well, there comes a certain point where it just feels almost gluttonous, and it's like you're just doing it just to say you can do it. And I always think houses are a lot like people. I mean, the houses that people really love. And I think about just throughout history, throughout just our country, houses that people love. People admire and revere Biltmore, but nobody really is like, oh my gosh, I could see my family living there. It's not that kind of house. And I think the ones that people love are the ones that are relatable. Just like people, they're the ones that are relatable, that are honest, that have good manners, that behave themselves around others. I think that's what good houses should do too. I think when you start getting, houses that start feeling, like I say, gluttonous and boastful and just big for the sake of being big, I think it kills the spirit of good architecture and good house design.
I like to use the word intimacy.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be intimacy with the rooms. And as we're talking, I'm thinking about my house, and I think I have like maybe 2,700 square feet. And we use every room in the house. And the only thought that we're embarking on a renovation, it's to solve things where, like, you walk in the front door, it's all the stuff gets dropped there. Yeah. There's hockey gear there. There's lacrosse. Like, it is a functionality thing that I need that space, because it's what frustrates our family. Yeah. Is that you get up in the morning and you're tripping over everything. It's like one of those movies that you see, and it's like, all right, I need to solve. How do I solve that? And then the other part is that right now our kitchen's in the back of the house and our family room's in the front of the house. Yeah. So when my wife's cooking or anyone's cooking, we're completely separated. And it's like, all right, how can I solve that aspect of my life and correct it? It's not like I need, 6,000 square feet. I need just enough to put our whole family in a space where the family room and kitchen are in a similar area. Yeah. And then I can keep the old living room as the kids get older. We don't watch the same things. Yeah. But honestly, it's evolving to a point where I'll be in there watching the Bruins game and they'll be on devices, and my wife will be too. So it's like, we're all in the same room. We're not connected at all. Yeah. So it's, and then having a garage. I said that before. I would love to have a space where I can pull right in.
Well, you think of the big houses and you have these massive rooms, and like the usability of a living room that's 300, 500 square feet versus 700, 800, 1,000 square feet, it's not that much more usable. And I even think about my shop, my pole barn. You can only store stuff on the perimeter. It's not like you can put stuff in the center of the space. Like, I almost need partition walls in there to be able to make more usable space with that square footage, because it's not like I can like load a bunch of stuff it'd be right in the middle of the room. So I think a lot of times these rooms and the houses are so big, they don't have partitions. Everyone's open concept, and there's not that much more usable space there than in a smaller home that's kind of sectioned off correctly and has, interior partitions and smaller rooms and more intimate spaces.
Well, I feel like so often bigger houses completely ignore the scale of the human figure and how a person only fills so much space. A single person, there's a finite quantity of space that person fills. And I think when you get a person in a big room, you lose, to your point, Johnny, intimacy. You get even 5 people in a huge room. It doesn't feel intimate. My house, like yours, Johnny, it's an old house. It was built in '37, and it's not a big house whatsoever. But there's some like rooms that are certainly would be more comfortable. But everybody in my family hangs out in this one little den that's just barely big enough for a sofa and a chair and a TV and a coffee table. But all 5 of us are in there all the time. Nobody wants to be in the other rooms. They want to be there because it feels right for a person. It feels comfortable to sit beside a person and not be, 5 islands sitting around, a 500 square foot living room. And I think, like I said, big houses often ignore that, and they become just gratuitously large. Think about, for instance, like, I don't know if you've traveled much in Italy, or or pictures you've seen of the Pantheon, the one in Rome, that huge, the dome and the concrete dome. The way that even not to get architectural on a high horse here, but the way the Greeks and the Romans and all the classicists from back then had such a grasp of scale. When you're in the Parthenon or the Pantheon, you feel comfortable in there. Proportions are right, details are right, and scale of the architectural pieces are right. So the human figure, which is what all of the buildings in this world that are ever built are built to accommodate, I guess except for stables and livestock things, but that's the user. And I think you have to, when you're designing a house, you have to be very cognizant and aware of who the ultimate user is and the darn size of that user. We're people. We're 6 feet tall. We're 24 inches wide or whatever. And so I think even though like I said, the Pantheon is a whole different scale and a whole different attitude, that those same principles are applicable to every building we design.
Now, do you wish that more builders had those values? Like, not just you. When you're designing it, I mean, your creativity is behind you on the drafting table and on a computer. Do you find that there's a disconnect sometimes? I mean, I'm sure you choose certain builders that are great, but you know, in the younger years when you were developing your Rolodex of builders,
yeah, I mean, a lot
that don't share the same values that your drawings do.
So I think of you guys, really the three of you, and there's a lot of others like you. You're sort of anomalies, I think, because you do really, really dig into the architecture and you really appreciate it. But a lot of builders, even some of the very best builders I work with, they're just direction followers. They're rule followers. And so I don't think I can say, you know, I really wish you knew more about scale and proportion, because I think that's on my shoulders. You know, I think that kind of falls in my court. Do I appreciate working with people like you guys? Of course. And that makes my job even easier, and it makes my job more fun, because I know there's a certain resonance that happens between me and the builder. And of course that trickles into interior design and landscape architecture as well, a knowledge and an appreciation of scale and proportion. So I think a builder having that knowledge is just icing on the cake. I think that, like I said, I think a lot of that just happens to have to fall on the shoulders of me and people who do what I do. It's also a very difficult thing to understand and to appreciate. You can easily feel it when it's right, you can feel it when it's wrong, but it's really hard to pinpoint how to create it.
I think that's the biggest issue, that most people can say, okay, this feels right, this feels wrong, but they don't know how to actually explain that, dissect
Right.
that, articulate what's making them feel that way. Or they couldn't come up with, you know, here's a blank room, make this feel right. Which that's where you turn to somebody like yourself, a designer, an architect, that can help kind of do that. I think the other thing is, a lot of times people, you know, it's a timeline, and if there's not money in the budget to be slowing down and ensuring that those details and that scale is right, they're going to go blow through it, whatever's the easiest way to do it, whatever works out that they can dimension the room and it's this many less cuts.
Right.
And that's just the way it's going to be done. And it's a shame that in order to do things properly, design things properly, and take the time to build properly, that you almost have to be in an elite type of class to be able to afford
Isn't that unfortunate? I think that's so unfortunate.
It's crazy to me, and it's just that it happens so quickly too, because, you know, my house is 1890 and there's an addition off the back that somebody put in 100 years later, and it's so wrong. And like 100 years may seem like a really long time, but in the bigger picture, it went from building a really nice house, and like 100 years later, it's just crap.
Yeah.
It went. I mean, if you look at the big picture of the Earth and everything else, that's a really short time for us to lose and throw all of that out the window.
Right. And the question is, how do we get it back? I mean, how do you? I don't necessarily agree with when they say they don't build them like they used to. They do. They still build them like they used to. You can still build a house that's every bit as good as a house that was built in 1890 or 1930. It's just harder, and it's more expensive, and it's not common knowledge like it used to be.
Do you think the increased cost will push people to be more creative from how they build things, or less creative and try to find cheaper alternatives? Because I think about, Tyler, your house, 100 years later, they put a crap addition on it, and was that because the cost of materials was so low that they just kind of went for it and they didn't feel as though they needed to really think it through? Or is it the flip side of, you know, things were so expensive, and, you know, we're going to try to spend as little as possible, and we're going to do that by not thinking it through?
Or C, they just needed square footage and didn't appreciate design.
And they didn't appreciate design.
Quality.
Or D, did they just hire somebody whose job it really would have been to design something pretty for them, but who really didn't give a rip and just churn something out? But I think it might be a combination of every one of those. But I still think that just the general knowledge. I mean, we talked about this the last time I was on this with you guys 4 years ago. You know, colleges don't teach the kind of things that we do. They just don't. Notre Dame does and Miami does. But there's not a vast or an easily accessible place for the common person to learn the kinds of things that people before just knew. Like, I don't know how these builders that just ran rampant in New England and the South, they weren't trained, educated people. They built incredibly beautiful houses with a knowledge that's way deeper than anybody has now. In fact, the knowledge is way deeper than a lot of people coming out of college have right now. And
I just think that
the question is, how in the world do we get that knowledge base back to just a general builder? I mean, how do you write the course at this point?
I feel like so much of it is that, you know, there's no unique idea. There's no unique design. It all came from something. And back then, you know, you're building a house and you come upon a detail and you look to the house across the street. How am I going to sort this out? And I can like reverse engineer how to do that. You see something, let's integrate that. But now, like, you drive down the street and I'm going to integrate, you know, this eave return onto my house, and I look and there's nothing to look at to mimic. Right. There's nothing to copy. So everyone who's, you know, the designs that are out there, the vast majority of them, it's junk designs. And so when, you know, the next person comes up, I want it to look like this. Or when somebody's, how am I going to do this? And they look across the street and they see that's how they box the soffit out. That's how they're going to do it. And there's not enough houses, and there's not enough that people are seeing or restorations that are done correctly for people to be copying and mimicking those details.
Well, and I think also just in terms of the speed that people are doing things at, the rush that everybody's in, these builders only know it one way. They're going to continue to, or not just builders, but the tradesmen, the cornice guys, they're going to keep doing it the way they do it because they don't have time to learn another way. They're going to do it the same way they've done it on the past 37 houses they've done. And if that's wrong, then so be it. It's going to be wrong on the next 37 houses they do because there's just not, I don't know if it's time or interest or I don't know what it is, but there's just not nobody's gaining the knowledge to do it right anymore. Which is why I think everybody on the planet should have that book, Get Your House Right. I mean, it's the most concise, boiled down to its core source of how to do things the way that those people that we're talking about back in the early part of the 20th century just innately knew how to do. I struggle all the time with that, just simple details like that. You guys, I'm sure you know the book as well as I do, but the rich man's cornice versus the poor man's cornice. I mean, it's not a difficult detail to do. It's just that people struggle on how to execute it and how to, like, why would you do that? I don't get it. And you do it because it's right. That's the only, I don't have another reason to tell you, but you do it because that's how you do it.
But it's also, that book does a good job of explaining why
100%.
It's right. And I think that's the most valuable portion, part of that book, is that it walks you through, you know, it walks you through the why. And when you start walking around and seeing people use crown molding and chair rail and all these other molding profiles, and you look up, it's like, that's wrong.
Yeah.
That's not a supporting molding. And he's using it as support, and it's interesting because it opens your eye up, you know, as many of these publications do, to thinking things through, and that's something that, you know, I know we all advocate for, is like, really be thoughtful and be intentional with what you're trying to accomplish.
Well, it's almost a knowledge base that can be a burden. I mean, when you literally almost can't walk into a new construction house without the slaps on the face that come from what you know how to do and what you see that nobody does.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely real. Like the fatigue of constantly being, you know, flooded with information. You know, and nowadays, you know, there's so much information out there coming at you so quickly that, you know, even products, we talk about that. It's like, you know, it's every day there's a new product, and it's like you're constantly wondering, like, is that what I'm supposed to be using, or is this?
Right.
And you're constantly, it's almost like you're reinventing the wheel, and then you have this entire generation that is ignoring it, saying, nope, I'm not even going to look at it because this is how I've done it, and I'm not even going to consider switching it up.
Exactly.
I think time, it comes down to, again, how long people have to spend on stuff too. And I think from my own personal experience, I look when I first started, and I could do a bathroom in 2 weeks, and now, like, that's an impossibility. Everything takes longer for me now. The more experience I have, the more knowledge I have, the longer things take, because you're integrating more details, you're integrating better systems that are longer lasting. And you're taking time to at least try and hit those critical details. And it really, the more if you look, Brandon, when you first drew a house or designed a house compared to drawing or designing that same house size now, it would take you much longer now, because when you first did it, you didn't know what you were doing. You could fly through it. You're not integrating all these details. And now you look at it and there's like 30 times more details that you can integrate into this space, and it's just going to take longer the more that you have. And I don't think that people have the budget, the time, or the energy now. And then, a lot of times you're walking into somebody else's headache where it's like, this looks like this over here, so I might as well just do it over here like that.
That's right. What's the old thing? You can have it.
Tough.
You can have it fast, good, or cheap, but you can't have all three of them. Choose two. And that's never been more true.
Yeah, it's a battle. I don't know how. I think, John and Nick, where you guys are, I mean, Brandon, where you are too, there's a lot of old homes and there's a lot of traditional architecture that people can look to for that inspiration, and then can actually just see what's right. And even if they don't understand it, if you see a well-built house, a well-designed house next to a poorly designed or a poorly built house, you can tell that there's something right about one and something wrong about another. But you have fewer and fewer well-built, well-designed houses, and you kind of lose your point of reference. So now, like, your point of reference is completely skewed in a lot of parts of the world, because a lot of those old houses are torn down and they're replaced with something that those details aren't there.
So our collective taste in architecture as a society, I guess, is just getting lower and lower and lower.
It's being redefined for the worse.
Yes, exactly. I mean, what do you do when there's no really good precedent anymore? Your precedents become bad, and your new stuff becomes worse.
Well, even worse than that is your market loses value in the things that you value.
That's right.
In those older homes. And then to be able to fight against that curve between realtors, market value, and all these other things that impact, like we were talking earlier about square footage, there's so many times people are coming to us because they want to know what 5 bedrooms, this Rolodex of things they need that are based off of, Zillow or what a realtor told them, that if they have to build, they have to build to this, not to what their family needs.
Right.
And that's going back a little bit a second ago, is would any of you guys want to be more naive to the industry? Like we all say, like, hey, life was easier in high school where I didn't have, a burden, family, all these things. Life was, you wake up and you didn't have anything running through your head. For the industry, would any of you guys change? Would you be like, hey, I wish it was at year 15 I stopped being exposed to things?
Sometimes, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of good things. With every year you learn, you grow, you get better. But yeah, it seems like it was more fun when you didn't know as much. It was more exciting. Right. I mean, there's a guy who works with me here who just graduated from Miami, and he's so talented and so good, and so just gets so excited about things, and because he doesn't really have that's going to be too expensive, and that client can't afford that, so we can't do that. We got to do this. So he has this energy and this excitement that's almost contagious about what he's doing. But I have to be like the old man who rolls in there and kind of shuts it down. It's like, sorry, there's budget, or we don't have time for that, or they don't have the capacity. The builder can't execute that. So yeah, I wish I could be 15 years ago. Those were fun times when we just knew enough to have a great time with it.
Yeah, I feel like there's once a day where I just want to be simple.
Right.
We just want to walk through life and not worry about everything that's going wrong and what's stressing me out. It's like, I don't know, wake up, just see what's in front of me, figure the day out as I go, and tomorrow I'll do the same thing.
There's days I wake up and think I just want to go work at Home Depot and call it just trade it all.
I would crush at Home Depot.
Yeah, maybe not Home Depot. Maybe, I don't know, maybe.
I'd be waving those flags like I was in a band.
The little equipment around there.
Ninja Turtles. No, I think about that all the time, but then part of me is like, I want to harness that moment in time that things were perfect and go, all right, on my ride home, like, what's the 3 things I could change to get me closer to that? Even though I should have enough knowledge that 15 years ago, I should be able to reenact that.
Right.
With employees or someone covering or a system or some sort of check and balance or finding the right client or doing a better job of vetting clients or designs. Yeah. There's that, I think now is more, before it was like the chase of, the only way of defining growth in the industry was to get a higher price tag project or a better project. In essence, it was bigger, but reality was that wasn't defining me. So now I should be able to find that and pull it back and be able to give that amazing journey to my employees that are still naive.
Yeah.
How do I do that? Every day I think that. I'm like, all right, what would have to change? Is it a drawing? Is it this? And then sometimes you get a job and you're like, this is cool, and you fell into that naive kind of pocket again, where it's like, oh no, it's a great opportunity, it's this, and then I'm like, no, I've just put my entire company in that same situation. I'm gonna relive the last 1,000%. Year again.
Yes.
And it's like, dude, what am I? I'm not using any of my experience.
Right.
And that's where I feel like I fail now. And that's how I judge my growth. It's like, am I doing the right steps? And it's painful to be real with yourself.
Yes, it is.
It's also a personality type. I think that, all of us want to spend the time digging into those things. It's not about the dollar value. It's not about the time that it takes. At the end of the day, seeing those things come to fruition, whether it's headache or not, whether it creates stress, anxiety, and it's backbreaking work, that's what gets us excited, and that's what we want to do, and that's why we're in the position that we are. I'm in the middle of a job now where it's a referral for customers. It's a job that I basically would have done like 8 years ago where I didn't know that much. And I'll make more money on this job than I do a job where we're implementing and integrating more higher end, more detail oriented work. But it's just like, it's not what I want to be doing. It's just kind of proof, and it reaffirms what I'm doing, that all those headaches and all the stress and all the pressure is actually, I'm putting it on myself, and that's what I want for one reason or another. And I want to spend the time sorting that out. I don't want to wake up and go through the motions like I'm sleeping. And then, on this job, I'm going through the job, and usually when I'm doing a job, I get to a point and everything that you do, you're like, oh yeah, that looks good, or it's coming together. And there's all these checkpoints where you get excited for it. And I keep progressing and pushing through this job, and I'm like on punch out, and there's still I'm still waiting for that part where I'm like, yeah, this really came together. And I'm like, yeah, this isn't for me. That's why I tried to get to the point that I am, to be able to get in with the customer base and do the work that I want to do, because that's what interests me.
It's like a drug addict.
Completely,
yeah.
At a certain point, I've never done drugs, but it's just that I feel like you get a certain dose. It's like Advil. If I take 2 for the next 3 years, I'm going to need to take 3. And it just never, it keeps compounding.
It's that constant quest for better and yeah, it's
you're chasing the dragon.
And it's kind of what we were just talking about. Isn't it? It's like the more you do, the more you know, the less satisfying projects can be, because all you see are the little things that maybe weren't perfect. You know what I mean? I think about some of the finest houses I've ever done. They're great, and they're I don't mean that boastfully, but there's some good stuff. But in my mind, when I look at them, I still to this day, I'm looking at one on my wall over there, I cringe because I think about the 3 or 4 little things. I'm like, gosh, we really missed the mark on that, or I wish I'd have done that, and that's all I see. And so the next time, all I do is focus on not doing that again. So instead of focusing on what I want to do, I'm like, all right, how do I avoid? You know what I mean? It's like like the more you know, the better you get, the more crippling it can be.
But I also think that's why you progressed as quickly as you have, because there's a lot of people that those details don't keep them up at night, and they don't make them cringe 5 years later, 10 years later. They don't retain those mistakes because those mistakes hurt so badly. Like, you had this amazing project that you knocked out of the park. All the time I sit there and I let one or two little things ruin it for me. And like, the only time I can appreciate those jobs is where I see like pictures that are like zoomed out, where I'm not just focusing on the things, and I'm like, wow, that turned out really nice. But when I'm walking that job, I'm just like, I don't even want to look in that direction. But I think that makes you grow 10 times faster than somebody else who's doing it, who's not beating themselves up over those things, because you'll go to any length to avoid doing that again.
Right. That's exactly right. And you also start to learn kind of the more you do, the more you learn the pitfalls. You start learning, all right, these are the things that are going to catch us up. These are things that are going to be more difficult for a builder to execute. So these are things we have to really, really watch. And you start learning the things that you can say, all right, you got this, we can handle this, but we really need to sharpen our pencils here or there. Funny example of that, we did a really beautiful plantation project down. Well, actually the first job I ever did after I started my own firm. Huge plantation house down in South Georgia, quail plantation, beautiful hunting property. But these people collected, like, this is maybe not very in vogue right now, but they had a whole menagerie of taxidermy, everything you could imagine, from elks to, we might have to edit some of this out, but lions and leopards and giraffes, and it was really, there's a lot of stuff. But their prize.
Hold on, you said giraffe.
There was
right?
I heard that.
Yeah.
How big was that room?
Brandon, this room needs to have a.
Well, these things are scattered throughout. There's photography of this house, and I was there when we shot it. And literally, if you could just look just out of the camera lens, I'm like holding an elk out of the camera lens. I'm pulling like a leopard away. And there's things we just couldn't shoot because magazines and people are just easily offended by that sort of thing for understandable reasons. But one of the things that this guy liked, and really one of the things that we built this whole project around, is this full body lion that he has. And the story that they tell is that the lion was actually killing children in villages, and he, was very proud of himself for taking the lion out. But literally this whole, you guys might, I don't know if you remember, I've got this pretty image of photography of this blue groin vaulted hallway where there's a stair and this is real kind of tall ceiling. But if you could turn around and look away from the stair, there's about an 80-foot infilade, like an axis running right through the house, that terminates in this really beautiful elliptical arch where the lion was to go. So this lion, he measured, he had it in a warehouse somewhere. So he had his measurements for me, sent me everything I should know about this lion. The house is done. There's this beautiful walnut paneled library where the lion was going to go. They get this guy in there, and they forgot to measure for his tail. And this tail, it's a taxidermy tail, so it's hard, and you can't bend it. So the lion doesn't fit. And the whole thing has to be cocked out of it's like at a 30-degree angle in there. This whole crescendo of the whole house. And so when I look at
you won't ever make that mistake again.
I probably will never design another house with a lion, full body lion.
Next time you have a lion, next time you're designing around a lion, you won't forget to measure the tail.
But I mean, that's the kind of things that you like. Now when I look at that house, all I think about is that crooked lion. The homeowners are fine with it. They think it's great. They actually think it's funny, and they're like, haha. But it's that kind of thing that it's learn as you go a little bit and never make those mistakes again.
But that stuff hurts so bad that it's like you never ever forget it.
No.
Well, at least I can know. At least, Tyler, I can know that the architecture was good around the lion. It was just a lion's tail. I try to get them.
You just got to make up a story that you take the tail off and he lost the tail in a fight while he was killing it.
Make it
It'd be so easy.
Give him a little stub tail or something.
Or make his tail be tucked between his legs like he's embarrassed.
Yeah. How So how do you go about that? And I'm sure that you've learned ways to do that, but when you have these critical details or these things that are so important to you with your design, because I know there's a lot of architects who don't necessarily care that much about their design and their details and getting it right. How are you managing that end of the job to ensure those are getting done right without really slowing things down and overstepping your boundary and keeping kind of things on site working the way that they should, keeping those relationships intact?
Yeah, well, I mean, like we've talked about before, I value relationships with builders probably more than some, I would think. And I think it's always a team effort. So everything I do, it's number one, first and foremost, it's for my client. I mean, they are the boss, they are my boss, and they are what I'm working for. But also I think that I intentionally tend to keep things structurally, detail-wise, simple and logical. And I don't really try to pull architectural gymnastics and crazy tricks out of my hat. The prettiest things, the finest things are really the ones that are the most honest and the most simple. So details that I execute a lot of times they tend to be a little more familiar to the builders that I work with. But when there are critical details, like what we're talking about, those are the ones that I'll really focus in on. We'll have meetings about them. We'll talk about them, and we'll really dig even deeper into our drawings to make sure that those are the things that we get right. I literally today, what we've been working on in my office is a balcony detail on a house. Actually, a project with Jason Black, who you guys know. A upper railing detail. We just spent 2 days detailing every inch of this because we know it's such a critical moment in this one house. Whereas there are other details that are more straightforward, where I can just pick up the phone, call Jason, send him a little sketch, and I'll just sit here and draw real fast, and he's got it, and he knows how to do it. So I think if I were to give every detail in a house that infinite level of attention, it would take us 10 years to design a house. So we can't do that. It's knowing the things that are gonna snag a project, and knowing the things that are gonna be executed easily and effectively with a little bit less hand holding. And that's kind of how we manage that. And again, it goes back to having good relationships with the builders that we work with, and being there when there's an issue. Being a text at 9:00 at night, you answer the text from a builder who's got a question, and you have to play a support role. And a lot of these things, like we talked about before too, clients don't need to know. They don't need to know every hiccup that comes up and every bump in the road. They just need to know that it's worked out and everybody's happy with it and it looks the way it should look. Whether it's the way it originally was designed to look, that's kind of irrelevant as long as it looks like it should look.
I guess that's probably pretty similar to how you're growing your business as well, right? Because like you're the face behind the business, you're the face behind the designs, and now you're kind of, for lack of a better term, scaling your business, hiring employees, and it's got to be of the same principle where you find where your time is most valuable and focus it there, and then start handing out those tasks to people either to fit their strong suits or just where their time is better spent.
That's exactly right. I've learned that my time and my energy is much better spent with a pen, at a drawing board instead of in front of a computer. But I've hired a team of very talented people who are very adept at all of it. And to your point, Tyler, I know whose strong points are what, and I can send, once projects leave my drawing board, they don't leave my attention. I follow them throughout every step of the way. But I can place them in the hands of people who are very capable at developing them farther.
Has that been the hardest part about kind of scaling up and hiring people, is just letting go of that control and ensuring that your name's still on it?
It's incredibly difficult. Well, I mean, like you guys, I mean, I have there's a certain kind of pride that goes into what you do, and so if it's going to have your name on it, I mean, it's got to be up to a certain standard. But there's also a point where you just have to hand it off. You don't have a choice. But it's very difficult. I mean, and I don't think it comes from an egotistical place. It just comes from taking pride in what you're doing and wanting it to be the very best that it can. And that's why it comes back to hiring the best people that you can, who get it. And isn't it interesting that there comes a certain point in when you have employees where they really do start, they pick up more from you than you're thinking, and it's like you blink your eyes and all of a sudden they're doing things that are exactly what you would do, and that's a really good feeling.
Yeah, I need more of those.
I think that's getting the right people,
That's
right?
That's
You
right.
know, like that's finding the right people where they're watching and they're learning from you and they're taking your lead, and then they finally start implementing those things themselves. That's the goal.
Well, that's when everybody starts having more fun, and we're all having fun. That's when we're doing the best work. You know?
That's the key, is like keeping it fun. And when someone is on the team that doesn't share the same drive or doesn't share the same vision or doesn't believe in it or struggles with it, it makes the entire thing not
That's
fun.
right. And that shows up in
And that's
projects. Like you can literally
It shows up in projects. It shows up. It shows up It shows up at home with everyone that does want it to be fun. And that's what and that's what I think I alluded to in the last episode, is just I've struggled with that, where it's and rightfully so. We grew very quickly and we've hired a lot of people, but at the end of the day, it's like I have to physically remind myself that I'm doing this because I want to.
Yeah.
I don't owe it to anyone to do
That's
this.
right.
This is something I want to be doing, and if I'm not having fun and that's being ripped away from me, that's not forget me. It's not fair to my family.
If you're making it fun for everyone else and not you,
That's right.
Right.
that's a problem. And it's the same as, but at the same time, it's like we want it to have the same idiosyncrasies and the same things that they're adapting to and catching. But how many times have we all said, well, they're not going to be me? We're making excuses for them, going, they're not going to think like me. They're not going to have the same
We're
drive
making
as
an
me
excuse.
and the same wants. But reality is my inside voice is screaming, but I want that.
Right.
It's why I hired
Right.
you. I saw that you had the same things that I loved, and you fell in love with the culture of a company that we show online,
Right.
that this should align.
Correct.
And why is it that I'm waiting X amount of years for it to align? I want that moment
Right.
that we're describing. It's like, yeah, it's going to be great. But the problem is it fizzles out so fast that it's like, all right, Hato, like, I just want one of your products, and I can probably get rid of half the guys I have, and then I'll just sit at your job.
Let's do it.
I'm in. I'm trying.
I'm ready.
Do you find you have a lot of people coming to you wanting to work for you? Like, does that help with your hiring prospects?
I mean, to some degree. I mean, we get resumes and things like that, but the job market down here is completely saturated. I mean, everybody who wants a job's got a job doing what we do, and it's there's not a lot of shifting around right now. People, there's just not, and it's Atlanta's just such a saturated design market. There's so many talented people down here that just do such amazing work. But yeah, I mean, I think when the time's right, when I'm ready to hire somebody else, it wouldn't be hopefully terribly difficult to find that right person. But it's also, and as you guys know, just hiring people in general, it's like putting training wheels on again after you already know how to ride a bike. It's like you all of a sudden have to step back 3 steps, and so the time commitment is what's so difficult with hiring somebody at this point.
Yeah.
It's being able to dedicate your time to training somebody, even if they're very talented and know what they're doing, but training somebody to work the way you work, the way your office works, the way your job sites work. That's a challenge, and especially, like I said, the way things are right now, where everybody's so busy and everybody's so slammed, and it's all hands on deck all the time. It's a big commitment to make.
You have to be able to step back some, and that's the hardest part. Is that it's like, wait, I have to slow down in order to speed back up,
Right.
like, and it's counterintuitive, and then taking that step backwards and then putting all that effort, and then potentially it doesn't work out, and then you're on to the next person, and then you have all this downtime where it's tough to be able to slow down enough to get things in order to instill those principles and values and then get going again. And, the hopes is that it works out and it's a long-term relationship and it's great, but that's not always the case.
That's right.
And you have to prepare yourself for disappointment.
I mean, it's especially, it's not like any of us run the type of business where it's like, hey, we just need a body. We just need hands. We're looking for something very specific.
That's right.
We have high standards and everything else, and it's not the easiest position to fill. And I think I ran into it a lot where people see the end result, and they see they don't see all the negative aspects or the difficult times or the like you said, text messages at 9:00 at night, and they don't understand the full capacity of what goes into it. And then they're like, wow, this isn't just about a pretty picture at the end.
Right.
There was a lot of headaches that went into this that made it really difficult. And that's also a tough hurdle when you're hiring somebody, that they understand that it's a grind and most days are dirty and it's not fun and you're solving problems and you're making issues disappear.
Right.
So, John, you're going to hire him to do your next build?
Oh, dude, I would kill for that.
Brandon, I want to talk about working Oh, sorry,
No.
I didn't mean to cut you. No, I just working outside of your geographic location.
Yeah.
What does that look like? Because it's one thing that I'm jealous of architects. I wish builders could have it.
You guys don't have
I'm not
that
gonna say an
luxury, for
easy
sure.
time traveling, but it's much more difficult than an architect. So what does that look like for you, and how do you approach that differently than, say, you're a local build?
I mean, it's different, but it's the same. I mean, my process, it doesn't matter if I'm designing a house in Buckhead or New York or Mars. It's all going to happen right here. I mean, literally, I'm going to design it right here.
I'm so jealous.
I mean,
with that.
I need to put this thing on the back of a car and travel with it. Have a drawing board. We'll travel. So my process is the same. And so what the challenge for me when I work on a project, I mean, the farthest one I've had, I'm potentially going to be working with a couple in Australia this year, which will be really cool. I've got one in Canada, and I've got one in Denver and Seattle, and so they get out there. But the challenge I have is taking the way that I handle a project that is here in my own backyard, and applying those same things that make those projects work, those relationships work, to builders that aren't in my own backyard. So it's working really hard on that relationship. It's opening up communication all the time. They might be in a totally different time zone, but I have to be available, or somebody in my office has to be available for anything they need. I have to be ready to get in a plane and fly out there at any point. I can't tell you how many times I'm on a hour-long conference call or Zoom call or FaceTime or whatever. And FaceTime is actually a really great thing. We use that a lot. Builders out in Arkansas trying to figure out the details. So we'll FaceTime real quick, and I'm looking at the picture, and I'm drawing while they're talking, and I'm sending a solution on the fly. So it's really just it's setting expectations on keeping me in the loop, because where projects that are out of town go off the rails is when builders kind of forget that I'm in the picture, and they just go off and say, we'll figure it out. We don't bother him. We'll just figure it out ourselves. And that's when bad things happen. So it's like I said, it's me nurturing that relationship, staying in the loop, keeping connection between myself, the builder, the client, the landscape architect, the interior designer. I always like to tell clients, in a perfect world, I am just a member of their design team. I mean, I'm not the star, not the lead. I'm just one member or one spoke on a wheel. It's me, it's builder, it's landscape architect, and it's designer. In a perfect world, a client could go travel to Europe for a year, and the project would handle itself because they've hired the right people. And I think similarly, no matter where I am, I'm a part of that wheel, and that wheel can keep turning with me contributing what I need to contribute to the project. So I've never found geographic location to be a hindrance whatsoever.
It's just something that like I said, it's just I've been talking about how I want to be able to build anywhere, and it's whether or not that ever comes to fruition, or how I approach that, or what my involvement is. I find it really interesting, and I think the interesting part is that it becomes more about the house than the location. And it's about utilizing what resources you have available to you in that very location, and it's all about the house. And it just it doesn't become tied to anything as far as like where it is. That's a traditional New England house, and I think it's probably the more modern design that talks to me there, where it's like I want it to be able to be this really modern, contemporary design that can live anywhere.
Right. Yeah, but don't you think that there's a slight naive, to go back to what we talked about earlier, that if it's in Toronto, until you get up there, and I think like you won't let yourself be blind to that.
No, and
like,
that's a good point.
If you didn't know Cambridge, and then you got up there, then you'd be like, all right, well. You look around, and just the type of people we are, you would want to be like, all right, this should incorporate this detail from the street.
1,000%. Yes. I mean, nothing that I design is in a vacuum, and it's never, I don't think it's ever just about the house. I mean, if I'm designing a house in Arkansas, let me back up a minute. I have clients that call and they'll say, I really like this house that you designed that's in Florida, and I just want to build it in Idaho. Well, number one, I don't resell anything. I don't say like, okay, let me just give you, here's the drawings, let me just sell these to you. We don't do that. But also, what we do in Florida is totally different than what we would do in Arkansas or Denver. And it's not just the type of house. You can do a traditional house, and there are traditional houses in every state of the country, and there's traditional practices and styles and that sort of thing. But everything down to the kind of stone, the kind of window, casement windows versus double hung, roofing. They're all very geographically specific. And so I struggle sometimes when clients say, I just want it to look like a, southern house, but I'm building in Idaho. Like, well, we can't do that. We're going to have to look at what does a traditional Idaho house look like, and how can we kind of marry those so that your house looks like it belongs where it's being built. I mean, the last thing we want is a bunch of things just plopped on pieces of earth that look like they fell from space and have no connection and no relationship to their neighborhood, to their community, to their state, for God's sake.
I feel like that's all I see when I drive around.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily mean it from a design perspective of like not taking into account everything around it. I think what I more mean by that is that I don't want to be limited by what one area has to offer.
I see what you mean.
And being able to adapt my particular design, but yes, 100%. In the sense that you're respecting what's around you, John. Like it's you take what Cambridge has to offer and you pull pieces from that and you put it into the design. You go up to Toronto, you pull pieces from Toronto and you put it into the design. So it's respectful of the area that it belongs, but there's still this overarching like tie back to. For me, it would be the tie back to our signature look.
That's a very good point, Nick, and I think that is part of the fun of it is seeing. I mean, I keep thinking about this house in Little Rock that we just did, but seeing people that live in these towns see a fresh perspective on their kind of architecture. If I did a house in Denver versus a Denver person doing a house in Denver, they're going to be coming from two different perspectives and two different backgrounds, and the agendas are going to be entirely different. But that doesn't mean they can't both fit in their location and be respectable, honorable houses. And so, yeah, to your point, I think the fun of it is bringing, any house I design, I'm going to research where it is. And I've got a whole library of books that reference about every type of house you could imagine, every location of house you could imagine. So I'm going to research. So I'm going to know what are the right ways to tackle that sort of house. But doing it in a way that is more like my style, for instance, I think it's fun. And it does offer every location a little bit of like I said, a different perspective on what their regional architecture could be.
Yeah.
Do you, Nick, for me, the hang up with building anywhere would be getting the team in order.
That's by far
that.
the most difficult part.
Having the design and bring the designer in place, and then you know, I'm sure that at that point Brandon's vetting out who the builder is, who the customer is, and he's one part of that that can kind of keep all things going. And you have to ensure that that team wants to keep looking back and looking over their shoulder, ensuring that they're executing this design the way that Brandon intended this design to be executed. And I think that would be the hardest part, is getting that team in order, walking into a market where you're I mean, look, you've been in Boston building for how long, and how often are you moving through subs or trying different people to get things to work? And as you progress, your teams get better and better. But Brandon has the ability to put his design with a builder who's already spent years in that area building that team of people, where he just has to facilitate that process now.
So there's two thoughts with this, and ever since I've said it out loud, I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. The one thought is that, well, maybe it's
just
not
fly everyone around.
Just fly everyone. Get it. Well, that's yeah. We'll get. All right, we'll make that option one, a jet. I think we'd do a helicopter. No, a helicopter's not fast enough. We'll do a jet. Option B is
tractor trailer.
There's no fuel. Maybe it's not about building a team everywhere. Maybe it becomes this consulting type thing where it's you kind of work remotely almost with the architect. Like you become this design build, and then you get out there and you almost oversee the construction of it, and you create like, hey, this is my product, and now and work with the local teams to do it. I think about like Benson Wood. They've built a house or have a house in every state, and I know they work with a lot of local guys in those areas. They also fly guys out to do certain things. The other side of this, the other thought with this, and not how to do that, but I'm also, aware of the fact that I think one of the reasons I say that I would build anywhere is really because we haven't made it to where we want to be as a builder locally with the particular product that we want to be putting out. Where if we were to say fast forward 18 months from now, 20, whatever, 3 years from now, and we were only building this particular product in and around the area that I live, I think my mindset would change. And it's more about casting a wider net, trying to be able to share that product at a faster rate, because I look at John, I'm impatient, and I want everything now. So I'm like, all right, let's just throw a big ass net out here. But at the same, or I could, to John's point, it's like maybe I'm just patient. Maybe I'm more patient and realize that net's going to catch him, and then once that portfolio is developed, then it's for lack of better terms, copy paste from there. I don't know.
Thinking of building in an area outside of my own gives me anxiety.
I'm starting. I think I got an email saying that I need to start paying for Tyler and John's therapy because I give them anxiety. And I was like, I mean, that's probably a fair.
It's so difficult. Every day is so difficult in the environment that you're comfortable in, the environment that you've established yourself. Imagine having that going on with stuff around the rest of the country, around the rest of the world.
Yeah. I mean, there's part of me that thinks that sounds terrible. The other part of me is like, that sounds kind of cool.
I also think, to Brandon's point, where, he's not just going to build something, he's not taking the same house design and just putting it in different areas where, like you mentioned, Benson Wood, which maybe they are putting the time into researching the local area, but like they're more of a production type of system, where, if somebody hires Brandon to build a house in an area of the world, he's going to put the due diligence into designing that house traditionally the way that it would be built, with the resources that are indigenous, local to that area. And I mean, that would consume a ton of your time trying to figure out the methods, the means, the contractors, and having that going in multiple areas. Sounds more like a retirement plan to me.
I just think that, I think the Fox Group does it, but they're also incorporating design.
Yeah.
I just, to get what you want, Nick, where it has your signature and it has the details that makes it you, I don't know if you can do the consulting gig where you're not like this. It's like they have it for designers right now. What's it called? It's that video.
I think it'd be easier to just put your product somewhere else than to integrate that area into.
Yeah, the expert. Like, so you could do the export part, but at that point, it's still not your product.
It's not, right.
And that's where to really do what you do, it's going to be putting in 10 hours a day on whatever site that is with your people. Right. And there's, I don't know. I would love to see it happen, Nick. Like, if you could figure it out, they would patent that shit and send it to everybody, because it would. I'm sure a lot of markets would benefit from having real passionate builders on the ground in certain towns and states that deserve it, architecture-wise or quality, or the market could definitely carry it. I'm sure there's plenty of people that listen to this that go, I've gotten 3 calls. Tyler, I referred you to somebody in New Jersey last week. They're like, can you come build? And I was like, no, I didn't even think about it. And I was like, I would love that, but the reality of it is let's just go simple.
Yeah.
I don't want to take any time away from my kids.
But I think that
me doing that is not.
The easiest thing to do would be to just put your product elsewhere. I think
like
to try and integrate it can't be one off at that point, not with building, to try and do a one-off project everywhere and have your hand in that many markets would be tough. The easiest thing would be to kind of refine your product, have a very distinct product, and then find a way to kind of put that anywhere that you want. But I think that once you start trying to integrate, local flair into that now it's like that's not your product anymore, and you have to start integrating different components to make that work. And now that just screwed up everything that you just did. And it's figuring it out in each and every place.
So that house that I mentioned with the taxidermy, it's in rural, very rural, deep South Georgia. But every single sub, everybody that did anything on that house was from Atlanta, and it was 4 hours away. So that in that particular job, what the builder did is it was in this tiny little town that maybe 8,000 people live in the town, maybe 10,000. But he rented 2 houses there, and everybody that worked on the house would drive from Atlanta. They would spend the week there. They would come back on the weekends. And it worked flawlessly, with one exception. The builder retired after that house. He hung it up and said, "I'm done." I'm done.
So would I.
It was the lion.
It was the lion pushed everybody over the edge.
He's like, I would do another one if the line was straight.
Yeah, but a lot of Atlanta builders will do that. Sea Island, kind of St. Simon's Island, which is kind of on the Georgia coast, is about, I don't know, maybe 4 hours from Atlanta, and builders will make that work. And what happens is they go to places like this plantation house I'm talking about. These tradesmen were lining up to go down there because they'd go hunting on the weekend, or they go fishing on the weekend, or there's actually one carpenter that his job was to go around and kill the rattlesnakes, and it was his favorite thing in the world, just to drive around. He claimed he started eating rattlesnakes while he was down there, which is kind of odd, but it's like it's a place. In our case, Atlanta is like this concrete jungle, and a lot of, as we know, the people that are craftsmen on houses, they're not exactly city folk typically. They love the opportunity to go to somewhere like that and spend a week, being outdoors and being in the country. And so it worked for this builder.
It's I recently interviewed for a job that was probably about an hour and a half away from us, and one of the questions the architect actually asked me was, what does that mean for, the teams? Are you going to be working with guys local? If you are, that's fine. There's definitely trades down here. But what about your guys? What about the super that's going to be on site? If he's got an hour and a half ride, is the project paying for that 3 hour commute, or is he paying for it? And I've never been asked that question before, and it's, you start to realize it's like, well, gosh, if he's leaving at 5:30 in the morning to be there at 7, and then wrapping up, say, 5 o'clock at night, and then he's getting home at 6:30, that's 3 hours of travel per day, 15 hours of traveling per week on top of, 40, 50 hours. It's like, who is paying for that? And
Dude, you know how many people are doing that now that aren't in our business? Like,
understood,
people have to
but
drive to the city and sit on Route 3 right now.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's a little different in the sense that they're signing up for that, where it's, not, and I'm not saying that anyone on my team isn't signing up to drive, but it's, that's not where we work. That's not where we work. So all of a sudden to add that, and it's like, by the way, you're going to now drive an hour and a half every day. I'm not saying it's right nor wrong. It just got me thinking where it's like, man, I'm literally asking someone to give this project 3 hours of additional time a day on top of the time that they're being paid to work. And, and just the way it was asked, it was just, it made me really consider, like, if we are to travel, like, what does that mean? And yeah, I think there's a lot of guys that would, jump at the opportunity to go spend a week away from their family and, be in a house and work on a really cool project. But there's, probably equal amount of people that don't want that and want to be home on time for their kids. Like, we just said, like, more time with our families. And I think it's something that has to be seriously considered.
Well, it obviously has to be a project that's of a certain caliber that's got the budget to pay for those kind of things. I mean, that's not a cost that you can afford.
And everyone believe in that mentality of that this is worth it.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's going to do that for a $800,000 house. It's got to be a real big project to make it worth anybody's effort and energy and time.
Yeah, because the project fatigue will set in for that super or that PM.
That's right.
Super early, and it'll be tough to. I mean, like, we usually compensate guys from job to job for gas and stuff like that. I know we're going down deep, but like going to the job, it's on them. And so we have one that's an hour away, and we take care of travel expense to get there. And they get up early and they're eager to do it, but it's the same thing. It's just being. I said it in a nonchalant way, like, no, I mean, there's people out there that drive to Boston and they would love it. This has probably opened their eyes to not having to commute. And like, I could, like my mom would do an hour and 20 minutes every morning and every afternoon. And she's like, wow, I love this. But she grew up in the mindset that it was just what it was. Like, and I was the same way when I was younger. I'd be like, hey, I go where the money is. So I'd be in Duxbury, I'd be in Canton, I'd be in Boston, I'd be in, wherever. And it was because that's where the project brought me. And it was part of the kind of rules of engagement, really, that it is what it is and you make it work. That's when I was self-performing everything. But I think as the markets get better and better like they have, people will hone things in. And like I had a guy the other day who was a local landscape architect. I was like, hey, we got a project, they're running out of steam on designing the outside landscaping. Can I bring you in? And he was like, we only do $500,000 jobs now for landscape architecture. I was like, totally respect that, love it. My walk away from that was, how do I do that? Why am I still going through the basement remodel that the guy called me because it was a referral? So I guess, in a changing of questions, how do you kind of vet that, sniff it out, and then I have a real hard time going, hey, this isn't for us. I'll even go, hey, I'll get your referral. They're like, no, we'll wait for you. I'm like, I want to be like, I don't do basements. I don't know how to do it. So how are you vetting people that probably come to you super eager, probably great family, but it's just not the right fit?
I would think that's probably my Achilles heel from a business perspective. Doing what we do, you've got to have a certain hardness about you that's like, no, I'm just not, I can't do that. And being too, I think I struggle getting excited about a I talk to somebody. I have on, I think it's Wednesdays and Fridays, I have 2 hours set aside where I will talk to potential new clients who have called or emailed or, and I suffer because I get so excited about their project, and they're like, "This sounds amazing. I could knock this out of the park. I could do a great job at this." And then they're like, "Well, our budget's $200,000." I'm like, it's not going to work. But how do I tell them no? Because I'm excited about their project. They're now excited about their project, and I think that's the thing that, and without fail, and all this being said, like I love all of my clients. They're all wonderful. I don't care their budget. I don't pick clients because of their budget. I pick clients because they're people I like to work with and I enjoy working with. But the minute, and I bet you guys have picked up on this too, the minute you take a job that is either too small, doesn't feel right in your gut, there's something that's not right about it, you take it, you regret it the minute you do, and the minute you do, something twice as good comes along and you don't have time for it anymore. It always happens. And so the notion of saying no, trusting your gut is still something I struggle with, because I just don't like to tell anybody no. Which is also, I think I'm not the only person in our industry that's like that. We're people pleasers. We thrive on making clients happy, on making people happy, on making builders happy, on making everybody happy. And saying no is just not something that's an easy thing to do. But one of the things I've had to start reminding myself is what's worse, to tell somebody no up front and potentially hurt their feelings, or take them on and not be able to give them the kind of service that I want to give them and hurt their feelings that way. So, it's kind of, of course that's easier said than done. I still struggle with that, but it's you either disappoint them now or paddle your wheels as hard as you can for the next year, making sure you don't disappoint them once they are your client.
It's so tough.
It's almost as if you just want to have them break up with you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I want to give them a reason not to want me anymore. Yeah. Or I'm like, I'll drag this out long enough that hopefully they just find somebody that comes along that they like better than me.
Right.
And they don't.
Yeah, but you don't want to disappoint someone, and like you want the decision to be in their court to walk away from it, not be like, hey, you don't work for me. Like, I'd rather somebody be like, I hate you, than have to tell you like you're just not a good fit
totally
for
agree.
me.
But even if you like give them referrals, like, hey, here's so and so, they're great with this, and you're saying
before,
no,
and people really take offense to that sometimes. They're like, well, we know about them. We didn't go to them because we didn't want to. We wanted to be here. And then you're like, oh, well, thank you. Now I like you even more. I had a client a couple of years ago. It was actually maybe 3 years ago now, who I've come to adore. She's now one of my absolute favorite clients I've ever had. But we got off to a rocky start because there was just too many changes, and she had very specific things, and she kept, it was a difficult project. But it's a cool project, and I kept interest in it. And finally, I reached a point where I had a heart-to-heart phone call with her. It's like, I don't want to keep progressing with this. I don't want to disappoint you. You have very specific things that you're looking for, and her taste would change by the week. And like, well, actually, I don't like that anymore. I found this other picture on Pinterest that I like better, and then I found this. And I was very honest. I was like, I love working with you, but I don't think it's a good fit, and I want your experience with building your house to be good and memorable, and I don't want to be any part associated with something that's not going to be a healthy thing. She's like, absolutely not. You're not firing me. I'm staying with you, and you're staying with me, and I'm going to learn something from you, and you're going to learn something from me, and that's out of the question. And I mean, what else do you say? I was like, yes, ma'am. Okay, I'll talk to you tomorrow when you change your mind again. But literally, and it's been going for 3 years. They still haven't built. We've still been designing. Literally just yesterday, we sent the final drawings. 3 years. And I adore this lady now. She is like she's the funniest. She's almost like my mother at this point. She's wonderful. And I've got to know her and her family. But it was so painful to like, build yourself up to have that conversation to say, this is it, and I'm gonna be glad tomorrow when I wake up and I don't have to stress about this anymore. But to be shut down on it was really kind of interesting.
But you'd have that conversation again.
I would have
with her. You would, right?
With someone, you would tell
not with her,
somebody else.
But yes, yeah. I would.
You wouldn't avoid that situation. You'd have that conversation
because it's. Like I said, it's better to disappoint them early on and keep going and get more money involved and more emotion involved. And then it's like the the longer you wait, the longer it's like dating a girl. You don't drag them on too long if you don't have intentions to stick with them,
Yeah. Well, I think it's also aligning expectations.
Completely.
Because she was on a different road than you, and you were on another road, and every time you got an answer, you thought that was it. And in her mind, it was just another answer along the road of getting to that solution. And it was just realigning. I had this meeting the other day where we started a project, and it was like 6 months in the works. And then we go and we have all these images we pass back and forth. And I'm like, so the bathroom's super modern, blah, blah. And his wife looks at me like, I have never had a conversation with her. And I was like, can we align ourselves?
Yeah.
And she pulls out the picture and she's like, wait, that was like the epiphany idea. And then she has like 15 other pictures next to it. And I'm like, you know what? At that exact moment, I was like, if too much time has passed since we permitted the project, I still need to sit down with you and just, debrief on where you are mentally. Because it wasn't that I was off. It's just that their thought process had evolved since the last time we had talked when we started permitting. And it was like, so I have another meeting tomorrow night at 3:00 going, let's just go over the drawings for another house.
And it can just wear you out. It will just emotionally, mentally drain you, and you start losing excitement about the project. And that's what I told this lady. It's like, I'm just afraid that I'm not going to be up to the task for much longer. Because it's exhausting.
Just imagine doing that in an active project.
Yeah, exactly.
That's like our world. Is that, hey, you build this, the painter paints it, and then we want to change it. And I got to bring the painter back and the carpenter back who just put all their effort into something that now has to get changed.
Right. At least mine is just lines on paper. I mean, you guys actually have legitimate things to worry about. But they're all different. And like I said, at the end of the day, you love them all. They're like your children. The houses, the clients, they're like your family. They are the lifeblood of our offices and our operations. So you have to love them.
Existence.
But and sometimes I feel like it's like that game Whack-A-Mole. Like somebody's unhappy, you make them happy, then here comes somebody else who you got to take care of. It's like, you're just pivoting around. Ultimately, they're all happy, but they just, they get out of line sometimes. We have to.
Some of my most loyal customers are the customers that I either had like a hard sit down with, hey, this isn't working out, or hey, this, you have to trust our process in this. Or one customer I did try and walk away with prior to starting the job, and just for whatever reason, it just kind of got everyone set straight, a restart, and they've been some of my best loyal customers that I have the best relationships now, but they weren't initially. It was the people where it was super tough and it just wasn't easy going and nobody could find their place in the process. And then when I had enough and put my foot down and had to sit down with them, it was like a switch flipped, and still have the best relationship with them. They come to me. It's not, a pricing thing. Hey, when can we schedule you? This is what we want to do. Completely trusting relationship. And I don't think if I didn't get pushed to that point where I was just like, I'm not able to do my job the way I want to do my job, and spoke out, where like everyone's always saying the customer's always right. You can't say what's on your mind, and where like if I didn't do that, I think that I wouldn't have ever worked for them again.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't be return customers, and it worked out, for the best, and they're customers for life at this point.
Well, I think there's always that sort of that moment where you finally feel like you've gained a client's trust. And I think that's what they're all looking for. I mean, it happens early on for some people and it happens later for some people, but they're looking for somebody. I mean, these clients are spending a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of energy, and they're wanting you to say, this is how you do it. I mean, clients, I tell you that some of the best reactions I get from clients is when they come to me with something that's a terrible idea, and I say, that is a terrible idea, and you do not need to do that. And that stops it. And they're like, okay, we believe you. But it's when you kind of, you try to be too nice and you try to accept, but sometimes it's that difficult statement, that difficult conversation that can really steer the ship for a client. All of a sudden, that's what it takes for them to gain your trust. And kind of, they need a little, authoritative attitude to understand that you do know what you're talking about.
It is, and it's them ensuring that you have their best interest in mind, and that they don't need to control that this is what you do, you're the professional, and that, I mean, selfishly, I want these projects to turn out a certain way, whether it's for you or whether it's for another person. You know, I want to bring your vision to reality, but at the end of the day, I want to be happy with what I do, and I want the design to come through the way that it should, and for it to be executed well, and for the process to go well, because that's just what I want. That's what makes me happy. And then you just have to trust that that's what we want, and it's not about making a quick buck, and it's not about taking shortcuts, and it's not about tricking you into decisions because they make my life easier. Right. No, you have to trust that we have your best interest in mind.
I've learned that one of the telltale signs of a client that's going to be difficult is when they come in. I mean, everybody uses Pinterest and Instagram and Houzz and all those things, which are good for kind of getting your wheels turning. But when clients come in and they have that stack or that big giant Pinterest board they try to share, and they immediately get too attached to some of those images, it's got to be like this. Like, I need this. I don't want to look like this. Don't look like that. I want to look like this. And my immediate response is, okay, put those aside. Like, that's somebody else's house. Like, you're here to create your house. And so getting somebody to your point, Tyler, to they don't have to be in the driver's seat. They're not the builders. They're not the designers. They're not the architects. They're the people that are the bosses. And it's kind of like what we're talking about when you're managing employees. There comes a certain point where you have to let go. You have to trust the people you've hired, have your best interest in mind, and they're going to take care of you. But it's those moments when I can say, if you want this house, then you need to go find who designed this house and let them do it for you again, because I'm not your guy, because I'm here to design your house. So let's get rid of all those images. Let's get rid of all those Pinterest boards and create our own. And some people like that, and some people don't. But it makes our life a lot easier when they have, you know, a certain level of trust.
Yeah, for me, that's a good customer, and I think I can always equate that to, I mean, for most people, it'd be commissioning a piece of artwork, right? Or for me, it'd be getting tattooed. I'm not going to go to somebody with a tattoo that somebody else did and say, hey, I want this. Like, I'm going to pick somebody because I know what style they do. And it'd be the same thing as artwork. I'm not going to go to somebody, I want a painting, and show them somebody else's painting and say, hey, I want this. Like, you're going to go to that person because you've seen their all of their work, right? And you've seen their portfolio and you like what they do, and then you give them an idea of what you want, and then you let them do their thing. And that's why you're paying their premium, and that's why you went to them, and you have to put your trust in them. And when you do that, that person's going to do the best job that they can with that, because now you're giving them that artistic freedom. You're not putting like a price tag on it. You're just saying, hey, I came to you because I like what you do and I want you to do what you do, and I'm going to give you some direction, and then you take it from there. And that, I think that's just being a good, trusting customer. You have to go to that person to understand that they're going to basically make your vision and create your home or create your piece of artwork with your best interest in mind, and with a formula that they use that makes it their brand and what they do. And I think if more customers understood that, and that it's not so much controlling that process as much as entrusting the people that you've hired to execute the way that they do, that it'd be a much smoother process.
Amen. That's right.
But I also wonder, how do we, this is me going the other way and looking at myself, how do we expect them to have that trust based on, like, we all know there's people out there putting images on social media that have no right doing that, and are putting clients in harm's way, where I don't want to also assume that they need to respect me and give me this trust. I also need to show that I need to earn it. Like, I also don't ask about budget the first meeting. You know, I want to understand them. I want to understand what their goals are, and that we're understanding of each other, and that it isn't about money. Yeah, it will be about money, because everything will come down to a price tag on details and how we can evolve it. But I look at, how does that conversation happen where it can be as fast as possible, but yet you're not jumping into a relationship, because it should go both ways. I should try and, there's been times where I've thought a client was great, and after 6 months of going down the road with them through design and all that, over that time frame, I've realized that, this is the wrong move, and walked away. And there's other times where I've known in the first 10 seconds that, like there's a client that we're vetting right now with designers and an architect. It's like, I want this one.
Yeah.
Like where I'm like, hey, have you touched base with them as a designer? Like, have you done that Zoom to see if we're a good team? And they haven't. And I'm like, but that's the right one. Like they have it, and and I still need to gain their trust. They have mine, but I'm just trying to figure out what is the steps that we all take to understand that, so it's equal on both terms.
I want to have customers walk an ongoing job, or speak to customers, or walk a completed job, or speak to the customers to understand how that went. I think that if it's a customer that you had a decent sized project with that fully understands what you do, that they'll be like, you don't need to be a part of that conversation. And it's not a referral as much as, hey, like, go walk this job we completed, ask them how their experience was. The customer will tell them, hey, you know what? They weren't the cheapest of the guys who we interviewed, but this is what they did. This is what they did that we loved. This is why we hired them. Walk an ongoing job. It's the same thing as hiring a caterer for your wedding. You're going to go to a tasting for it, right? You're not just going to be like, well, this person said they have good food, so we use them. And like, you have to have your customers hire you and ensure that they are hiring you because they want you, not just because they want something that looks like a Pinterest photo that they brought in. They have to understand what you do, what separates you, what differentiates you, and what you actually bring to the table. If not, they're hiring you for another reason. Like, they're not actually hiring you because they want your product or your process or your system.
Yeah, but at the same time, what are you doing to make sure? Like, for instance, one of the houses we just got is that, they're like, hey, can we get a list of references? Gave it to them. We had 2 referrals also that's how I got in the list. And then it was like, hey, we should walk one of our projects. Like I just said that for both of us. I want you to walk. I want you to see I want to see what you look at. I want to see what you get drawn to. I want to understand what your values are beyond what's drawn. You get me? I can get so much out of this, but I wanted to understand them. And that was key. And I guess my point is, I know, Tyler, you can say, hey, talk to these people, blah, blah. But at the same token, I know you answered me, and I flipped it again. But just like, what is it that we're both doing during that same timeline for both parties to make sure that, hey, because the worst thing we can do right now for all of us is to get into a 12 to 18 month relationship. And then no matter how much effort you put into it, the back of your head's like, the opportunity cost that I'm burning here is going to eat away at what I feel in this project. And I think that's what I'm trying to do. Is that's been my thing over the last 6 months to even a little longer, is making sure I'm not getting into bed for me, my subs, my guys. It's the wrong people that they put on a great facade, but I don't want them. How am I testing it?
You got to find out why people want to hire you. Like, why? Why are you coming to us? Is it because somebody said I could turn around a job quickly? Is it because somebody said that we're the best? Is it because somebody said that, we had a good design team? And if you are ensuring that they're hiring you for principles that are important to you, then you're kind of on the same page at that point, because now they're hiring you for what you do and not for something else, or for what they think you do, where you're like, wait, hold on, you said that you came to us because you thought we'd be done really quickly. Like, no, we don't move quickly. So now you're dodging a bullet right there, where I think most relationships and most projects that work out is when you're on the same page from the get-go, and when they came to you because they knew what you did and they wanted what you do, and for whatever reason they work out, and then you can check all those boxes and you can go through your process as you usually do, and then it's going to be a successful job.
Are you asking that in like the web form or when you meet them?
A lot of times, like, why are you coming to us? Have you looked at our work? Do you understand how we're structured as a company? Because a lot of times people, it's like, somebody emailed me the other day. I was a referral from an architect that, he said you'd be a good choice to get a quality project done at a decent price. And it's like,
Pass.
I wouldn't describe
Pass.
myself that way, right? So
No.
like right there, but you just told me that's why you're coming to me. I don't want to work for somebody that thinks that that's what I am. Like if I had somebody who said, hey, we're not worried about getting this job done quickly. We're not necessarily worried about what it costs. We want it done right. And like we want somebody to control this process, and we want it done well, and we want to ensure that it's long lasting, and the design can be timed. Like that's the stuff that I want somebody to come to me and be like, okay, they understand what we do. We're on the same page. And I think that if you understand who you are and what your business, what your strong points are and everything else, that you're going to set yourself up for a successful relationship. If you've sold them on something that you don't do, it's going to be a disappointment from day one.
I guess I'm just trying to figure out, like, it's when someone calls you and you love them, Brandon, and then they have a budget of $200K. Well, how did that get misconstrued? So I guess my point is how do you figure it out where people aren't, they're not trying to be forthcoming,
Right.
or they're hiding it, and it's just that's what I'm trying to say is that I'm sure there's people listening to this.
I mean, those budget conversations are had sooner than later. Obviously, I mean, we know those budgets before I even pick up a pen. But I think a lot of that, the not to veer into budget world too much, but the ignorance of what things cost, I think that's a complete function of Instagram and social media, and everything's at your fingertips. And I like this. Why can't I have this? And there's $0 signs attached to any image that anybody sees. And they see shows like, these HGTV shows that show, you can renovate this house for, $97,000 and
In 30 days.
in 30 days.
But do you think that if
there's a disconnect with reality with budget for a lot of
You
people?
can't get appliances for 6 months.
I mean, people will they'll come sit in my office and we'll kind of draw with them, sketch with them. We look at images of houses I've designed, and I mean, and I think I like to think anybody that sees it or kind of knows that these are not $500,000 houses, but they don't, and they think that we're going to sit here and we're going to churn up a lot of drawings and the drawing fees are probably going to be $8,000 or $9,000, and we can build this house for $450,000, and it's like, where, to your point, John, where is that disconnect? How did we both miss the mark on that? And it's a challenging thing but even the thought, Tyler, your point of having some kind of questionnaire or some kind of client vetting system, like my fear, as maybe it's again a personal flaw, but here I am part of the therapy session. But it's hurting somebody's feelings, and I don't want to offend people or be off-putting and say, if you're not spending $6 million on your house, and then you don't need to set foot in my office. I mean, because that's not me, and that's not the way I feel about it. Because I like working with people, not necessarily specifically on houses. So even that the notion of a questionnaire, which I think is a brilliant idea, I would worry about who it's kicking out. Like who could become a really good.
Who's it offending?
Yeah, who's it offending, and what is, like, how tight do you really want? How secure do you really want your gate?
I think
that's when having that conversation with somebody as well is important, or meeting somebody in person, or like you said, you're scheduling calls, and right, it's the same as we can always equate this stuff to dating somebody, where you're going to put a profile out of yourself, and you want to be honest with that profile. You want to make yourself look good. You don't want to build yourself up to a point that that you're not going to hit that mark, and you're setting yourself up for disappointment. So it's when you're trying to create those matches with customers, I feel like it's ensuring that they understand who you are and who you aren't, and what you're good at and what you're not good at. And if it's a quick turnaround that they want, well, hey, you know what? I may have somebody better. And then when they say, you know what, actually, it doesn't matter when we get it done, then it's the next step. Well, you can start having that budget conversation, but you don't want to basically shut that gate down and not allow any potential customers in or hurt feelings. But at the same time, you want to be able to devote your time to the customers that you have on your plate, and that's your next line of work. That's your next job, is that customer and that house and that process, and the way that you build that, and the photographs that you get, and your energy throughout that. And if you're dealing with customers or bringing on customers that you sold yourself one way, and you're not fulfilling your end of the bargain, or they aren't who they said they are, or they hired you because you said you were going to be fast and now you're not fast. And it's the same thing that Nick said before, where now that affects your employees, that affects the people in your home, that affects your subs. And now your entire world, your whole business is in turmoil, and it's nothing's going well. And I think that just creating that conversation up front and ensuring that you know who your customer is and they know who you are, and then it's taking the next step with them. But it's just like dating. You got to get to know somebody, and there's going to be some people who slip through the cracks, and that's the weird person that you're like, hey, you know what? You're a little crazier than I thought, and I think I'm going to start maybe ignoring phone calls.
So maybe it's not a questionnaire. Maybe it's like a Tinder app for builders and clients.
It's gotta be.
It's like a swipe left or swipe right, and you're a match.
Yeah.
This is great.
That's actually not a bad idea.
Bad.
It's like you walk through a couple things where it's not just like you swipe. It's one swipe. It's can you pay this price?
Yeah,
yes. And then if like maybe you get like if you 3 out of 5 match, then you can talk.
Next thing you know, you're meeting for coffee, and you're.
I think we're onto something. I think every podcast we have $1 million idea.
What they look like in pictures.
Right. This guy really doctored up his houses.
Yeah, his houses looked way nicer in person.
All renderings.
That's hilarious.
Brandon, we're respectful of your time, man. I know you got 5 o'clock. You got to jump.
Yeah, I got to
off,
go
right?
to my little boy's baseball game. So yeah.
Nice.
We got softball
Do you?
tonight.
I got lacrosse.
Yeah.
Look at all of us.
It's that time of year.
I don't have
Yeah.
sports.
Well, guys, it's always awesome
Saturday.
to see y'all. I love following everything that all of you do, and I think this thing that you guys have created here is such a cool thing, and I know everybody out there loves it and follows it. And if there's anything I can do for y'all, you know where I am. Just holler.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Respect it, man.
All right,
Thank you.
y'all take care.
Well, guys, as always, you know where to find us on Instagram. Make sure you're sharing our stories so we can repost them. Keep the 5-star reviews coming on iTunes. You can download us on
Approaching
all your
1,000.
podcast apps.
Really?
1,000 reviews.
Yeah, if you
Okay.
haven't taken the time to do that, it is really important to go on and give us some reviews and leave some feedback and all that stuff. It takes 2 seconds, and it definitely helps us stay relevant.
It does, yeah. It puts us in a good spot for really helping promote the show and get support behind the show, especially as the world opens back up and live events become a thing again. That's going to be an opportunity for us to attend some of those and get together. Any constructive feedback that goes to the link Johnny keeps an eye on. Survey Gorilla? No, I'm just
Survey
kidding.
Monkey.
Survey Baboon.
Yeah, you can basically add topics, request guests, all that stuff. All those options are found on that link.
And next week we actually have Kathleen Anderson. She works or I think she owns the company Material Design. She was actually a designer that was on Brad from AFT's podcast, and her and I hopped on a phone call and we chatted for a little bit. And I said, you know what? I think you need to be on our podcast.
Awesome.
So we get that coming up. We will see you guys next week.
Adios.
Thanks for listening.
In a world of ever-increasing lead times and escalating pricing, how about a product line that gives you neither? That's right, even completely custom molding profiles are produced in just 2 weeks from Duration. And as other molding and siding product line increases continue to march upward, Durations remains the same. Get exactly what you want, quickly, efficiently, and cost-effectively. To learn more about Duration Poly Ash products, please visit their website at durationmillwork.com and be sure to check them out on IG.